Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. It is the penultimate round of the Guinness Six Nations and we're shaping up for arguably the defining game of the 2025 Championship. Ireland against France, Saturday afternoon at the Aviva Stadium. Win and Ireland are one step away from a Grand Slam and an unprecedented third men's Six Nations in a row. Lose and France will potentially have one hand on the trophy already. I'm joined by Bernard Jackman as usual. And this week, we're also delighted to be joined by former Ireland under-20 coach, now attack coach with Bordeaux-Begles, Noel McNamara. Welcome to the pod, Noel. Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me on.
You're home for the week after a busy top 14 slate, catching up on the family, catching up on Ireland, and you brought some nice weather with you as well. This has been a great few days here.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. The first couple of days, I left Bordeaux. It was 20 degrees on Sunday, so I was dreading what I was facing into. But no, it's been beautiful here in Clare, albeit a little bit of rain today.
We're not quite hitting 20 degrees, but we'll take what we have at the moment. Before we get into this weekend's game and how everything matches up, just like how is life in Bordeaux? It looks a real tough slog over there. You must be awful homesick on the southwest of France.
Yeah, it has its moments. I think the reality and the nature of the top 14. It is an absolute marathon. It's a beast of a competition. When we started off, kind of that first week in September, it was we talk about the temperatures, but it was almost 30 degrees. We played against Stade Francais, and some of the games that we've played in between have been in very contrasting places and very contrasting conditions, but. No, to be honest about it, we're very happy. We signed a new contract up until 2027, and I got 3 kids, and obviously my wife Sinead over there with me as well. So they've settled in. They've actually they're in an international school the first year we were there, and it was very much kind of let's see how this goes. But we've changed this year. They're gone to a French school. They're gone to a local French school, and that certainly had its teething problems at the start, but they've very much settled into that way of life now. And we're very happy over there. And as you say, it probably isn't the worst place in the world to be stationed either.
Yeah, it's funny. Like over the last couple of years, people would have been throwing your name about to try to get you back into the country for various jobs and stuff. But when you see the standard of the league getting to top 14 final last year, then you look at the team sheet Bordeaux are putting out on a weekly basis, and particularly that backline you're able to work with. A handful of them more than likely going to be in the French backline this weekend. It's not hard to see why you're enjoying it so much over there and are staying on for another 2 years at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think talk about it. I suppose what would you look at if you're going to go to a club, and one of them is exactly that: the quality of players that are available to you. I think I've often quoted Jerry Murphy, show me a good coach and I'll show you good players. And, I certainly think that that's true. And the quality of the group that we have available. And also, we've got an excellent president who's ambitious. He's stated that he wants to bring trophies to Bordeaux. It's a young club as well, albeit, there is history there between Begles and Stade Bordelais as well. But it's a great place to work. I'm really enjoying it. I'm learning a huge amount. I feel, and Yannick is an excellent. It's a slightly different system over there. I suppose he's the manager sportif, so ultimately he's responsible for all parts of the club, from recruitment to the academy to the staff and the playing group. So a lot of autonomy in terms of how we try to play and how we try to approach every week. So yeah, certainly loving it at the moment.
And Bernard, I'm sure, as someone who's coached plenty down the years, I'm sure you're looking at the squad and the talent that Noel gets to be working with on a daily basis. And as I said, particularly but that backline, it must be from a coach's point of view, Bernard, you must be looking on and thinking, God, that must be a dream coaching environment to be involved in.
Yeah, look, it's well deserved. I mean, I tried to get Noel back in the day to join Clontarf when he came in for a meeting in the old Clydes of Donnybrook with folders full of his notes. He was and sessions he planned all the way back. I think he's put a huge amount in. He's very, very successful in the schools game and Clongowes, and obviously then went into Leinster, Irish under 20s, then took a gamble, or didn't take a gamble, went to the Sharks. Got out of the bubble of Irish rugby to back himself. Obviously, got to know Yannick there, prove himself working at the pro level, and now in Bordeaux. And I think you'll generally find that the really good coaches, they will get an opportunity at some stage to work with with talented players, and I think Noel now has got that. I was lucky enough to be down in Bordeaux on Thursday last, doing a piece for Joey Carberry for pre-match Saturday for RTÉ, and Joey is unbelievably complimentary about the impact Noel has had on his game, but also on Bordeaux's play. The facilities are first class. It's a beautiful city with a great stadium, and the president. I mean, I got to know Lauren Marty a bit when I was in Grenoble, and he's there for the long haul. He's already been through the trials and tribulations of Pro D2, get the club back up, and every year you just see another piece of the jigsaw fall into place, and it's no surprise that him and Yannick have tied Noel down, because I think this is, look, in France they talk about projects. What's the project, and you can see that Bordeaux are an exciting, ambitious project, and I think that's actually not that common. You would think everyone is exciting and ambitious. All projects are, but there's not. There's, in the top 14 particularly, because of the dangers of relegation, teams kind of set their stall out early doors around what they want and what success is for them. And it's such a difficult league. You look at the table at the moment, you've got some big names down the bottom. But Bordeaux, thankfully, are our club where we're looking up, and it's great to see an Irish coach be successful. We're starting to get more of them now. Obviously, Raj, James Collin, etc., and then ones who were abroad, like Jimmy Duffy and Prendy, coming back. It's testament to Noel's dedication, because to get to be a coach, having not been a high-profile player, is even harder, as Noel said, would know. And I think he's worked hard for the opportunity he has. But I'm fascinated to hear what it's like coaching. I spoke to Joey Noel, and I asked him, like, what's it like playing with B.A. Barry and Penno and Mo Fana, and he just said, look, how he'd sum it up is, sometimes in Ireland, in Leinster, Munster, Ireland, the wingers only want the ball when it's great ball, whereas he said, like, those players have such confidence that they want the ball regardless. And I know it's a very simple way of summing it up, and there's way more to it than that, but I think those players, they play with a confidence for the club and for France, which, when you back it up with the talent they have, it makes them incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think there's definitely a truth in that. They're hungry for the ball. They want to get on the ball. It's probably one of the things that we measure. It's how much we can bring them into the game, how much involvement that they can have, and we talk about it a little bit. We have a fast car and we want to drive it, and ultimately, I think the guys that you mentioned there, and there are others as well. You know what I mean? It is very much. I think I did an interview with one of the French media last week, and I spoke about it. It's trying to make the sum greater than the parts, and the parts that we have are pretty significant. So I think that's the reality of the challenge. You look at someone like Louis, like Damien, Yoram, I think will be the three that will start this weekend. But, you can add to that Mathieu Jalibert, Max Lucu, Joey himself. I mentioned John, we've got some really, really good young players as well. This time last year, Nicolas de Portera was starting. He had replaced Joe Dante in the French team and started 2 games with Gaël Ficou. So yeah, it's a terrific group. There's lots of challenges with the top 14 in a way, and we'll probably get around to it a little bit later. But Fabien Galtier and the current French team have probably unprecedented control and support, which they wouldn't have had in recent. So I talk about the doublons in the top 14, where the French players are unavailable to you, and because of the restrictions around the salary cap and having top end players, that presents its own challenges. One of the things, the big objectives in Bordeaux is to improve the quality of the academy, improve the quality of the players coming through, and you only have to look at Toulouse over the course of the doublons. They almost took full points. And they have this ability to bring in young players, not dissimilar to what you would see at Leinster. When their senior internationals are away, and they miss more than most, but they have the ability to bring in young players that take the place, that have real clarity on how they want to play, real clarity on the systems, and just have the ability to come in and perform. So I think that's definitely one of the evolutions for us, is to try and improve the quality of young players and the volume of young players. We used to talk about it, a little bit with the Irish 20s. You probably needed 5 Irish under-20 internationals to produce 1 senior international, maybe more. So I remember trying to explain that concept down in South Africa, and it was something that we had two players with the Sharks that played for the Springbok under-20s, and I was trying to explain it, that just unfortunately that won't be enough, no matter how good they are, because there's so many bits and pieces that go into making that next transition. You're trying to explain that somewhere like Leinster at times would have 20 Irish under-20s, it's a fascinating. It's a fascinating challenge how that goes about, and the different systems that are at play.
On the young players coming through, and we're seeing it in the last few years, just like particularly with a few players in France, like Louis Bielbarré, as Nicolas Deportier, as you mentioned, Theo Adesogbe as well, like these young flair attacking players that just look like free spirits out there, and some of them aren't even particularly big, like what's Bielbarré, probably about 80 kilos wet through. You've obviously seen
it's pretty quick, Neil.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. Like you've seen the young players coming through. You've worked in the Irish system, South Africa, and France. Are you seeing differences in the way the game is played and taught across those various systems? And is it just a case that the French system works for France because there are so many avenues with way more professional clubs? Is the Irish system suited to what Ireland have at the moment? Is South Africa suited to the way South Africa have it?
I think the biggest single difference is definitely the opportunities, it is as simple as that. You've got 14 clubs in the top 14. You've got the Pro D2 as well, which is a fantastic level. Week in, week out, there's opportunity. You look at Courtney Laws, you look at Kerwin Bosch. There's some fantastic players playing in Pro D2 as well. Jonathan Rurhul, last year, with Inox, is one of the best players in the top 14. He's now playing in the Pro D2 and is extended to stay with Inox for another long period of time. So I definitely think the opportunities is a huge part. I think obviously France, when they made the decision around the GIFs, they've done a fantastic job with their under-20s and their underage system and their underage structure. The GIF ruling has ultimately created an environment where you are incentivized to play French qualified players. You're incentivized to give opportunities, and then some of it depends on the coaches as well, and how risk adverse or otherwise they are. Bernard mentioned a little bit around something. Stade Francais were this time last year were top. Today they're I think they're bottom. Are they or second from bottom? No, they won at the weekend, so they're probably 12th. I think Perpignan and Van are beneath them. But obviously, if you're in those circumstances, you're quite risk adverse. I think someone like Yannick Brou has shown his a desire to give young players opportunity. I think Sebastian Piccarone is at Pau, obviously former French under-20 coach, has a good understanding, a good knowledge of young players and how to and gives them opportunities. I think Hugo Moala certainly at Toulouse, it has been clear and evident. I think, in fairness to Stuart, when he was at Racing, he was doing it as well. So some of it depends on that. But because there are so many clubs, there's so many more opportunities. I think they have to get an awful lot of credit for some of the decisions that were made. And Bernard was probably there at the time, so we'll probably have a better idea who made those decisions. But they're reaping the benefit of it, and it's understanding as well that decisions that are made in the short term have an impact 10 years later. You look at some of the decisions that unfortunately were made in Wales and Scotland during COVID, and they're probably starting to see some of the impact that has had now. I think, and the Irish system, there's lots of positives, lots of things they don't get credit for, but I think some of the decisions that they made around their development pathways and keeping all the staff, keeping everybody involved, continuing to run programs, continuing to invest is something that is clearly will pay off and has probably already paid off. So I think those are probably more significant factors than, there's an argument around the Latin spirit of the French and how they play the game and everything else. But, there certainly is a structure. I think most teams will have a structure. There's freedom within that. It's not dissimilar to us in Bordeaux. It's not dissimilar, honestly, to some of the Irish teams as well. But I think that's the most significant factor.
Yeah, just on that, I think I was there when those changes were made, and the clubs were unbelievably against it. But they had, you need a compelling reason to do something normally, and when you're kind of just tipping along and everything's okay-ish, that's rarely when you can make drastic changes. And I think if you look at Welsh rugby now, there probably will be decisions made over the next 12 months that hopefully will get them back to where they want to be. But it took 15 losses in a row, or to get them to that place. The French national team were probably, you could say, were disgraceful compared to some other parts in the club game. The club game was more powerful, but it was that home World Cup that basically was the focus point that allowed clubs sign up to an agreement they didn't want to agree to, which was around the GIF, the number of French qualified players you need to have. And once you put higher percentages on that, and the punishments, so the old days, the punishment was you didn't get some of your TV money if you didn't hit your number. And for the big rich clubs, that wasn't a strong enough disincentive. So now it's around points. Now everyone hits their number because you can't, it's too serious. But yeah, I was there when it happened. And what it did then was it made young French players more valuable. So if you invest in so I've said this a few times, but Grenoble ended up being a selling club really because the financial difficulties we were under. And now, but Grenoble are now back. They're probably going to get promoted to top 14. But it's taken 6-7 years of that investment in the academy. First of all, to sell some players, like Capozzo, etc., to keep the doors open. But now they don't need to sell anymore. And now those players are coming through, homegrown players, and hopefully we'll get Grenoble back up. So, and I would say from an Irish point of view, and we'll move on to the biggest issues at hand, which is the weekend. But from an Irish point of view, I'm not sure if we have an understanding of is this a compelling moment in Irish rugby, because the national team are doing very well, Leinster are doing very well, but I genuinely feel the other three provinces could do with a bit of support. I know you're not guaranteed a vintage Irish 20s team every year, but this year's Irish 20s probably aren't a vintage side. So if there's a downturn coming, or the health of the game isn't as strong across the country as it can be, well, this is when you need to actually put some changes in place. And I know Humphreys has admitted that he feels the other provinces aren't as strong, but it's what we do and how people accept that to change it. And it'll be 4 or 5 years or 6 years, 7 years before you kind of see the benefit of it. That's the short-term solution, is go out and give, each of the 4 provinces the other 3 provinces sign RG Slime and Geordie Barrett. That'll get them better next year. But long-term, the next homegrown players, the next Brian Gleeson, the next Hugh Gavin, the next McNamara up in Ulster. Is there going to be enough of them coming through? That's the challenge.
Sorry, just on that, Bernard, I definitely agree with you, but I think as well, regardless of the system that's created, like Toulouse in the last round of the top 14 had 29 GIFs, right? So they had 29 GIFs because they've worked it. They've worked the system, and obviously there's so many players involved with the national team. They were protected on that weekend. They had so many players, and then they've young players.
23 GIFs. Oh no, over the 2 games.
No. One game they had 29 GIFs because they had so many guys with the French team. And if you're involved in that protected French squad, that counts as a full GIF. And then whatever players. Yeah. So like you have to be hitting around the 17 mark.
Yeah.
But they're around. I think we were at 25. So we had 25 GIFs last weekend because Damien was protected, and Urim and so on and so forth. So it's whatever the system that's put in place. There's lots of criticism around the central contracts at this moment in time in Ireland. The reality is that system was put in place, and then you work as best you can within the system, and you take a maximum advantage that you can. And I think that's what Toulouse have done, and obviously their budget increases as a consequence of having more GIFs and everything else. So I definitely agree with you. It has to be balanced, and it's not always when you hit rock bottom you have to change it, but. Regardless of what happens, there's always a way of using it to your maximum advantage, I suppose.
Out of curiosity, Bernard, when you were there at the time and when those rules were introduced, who were the clubs that were kind of ahead of the curve with actually realizing how valuable this would be to them? Or were there any particular that were very slow
Toulouse,
to come
actually,
around?
Ironically, Toulouse weren't. Toulouse were on a bit of a downward curve. They'd gone a bit stale under Dean Oves. They hadn't been as proficient in developing their own. And if you look at the big change, Toulouse obviously have an unbelievable academy system. They have a nice a system of feeder clubs who are aligned to them. But they've also gone and signed very good young French players from other clubs, and they pay an indemnity for them. So when we look at Capozzo or Barassi now, we see them as being Stade Toulousain's players, but they were actually formed in other clubs. So, but they would have created an environment where the best young French players or Italian players, in Capozzo's case, they want to go to Toulouse, they want to go to Bordeaux. So, Toulouse took their eye off the ball, but they went back to their roots, and that's why Ugo Molla was an inspired choice, because he'd been sacked by Brive. You know what I mean? He hadn't had a CV that you would say, we're going to back this guy to get the club back. But they put a really strong support and plan around him. And he understood the Toulouse identity because he played there. And so did some of his other coaches. Then they promoted guys like Jerome Kino, who obviously, had an influence as a player, but understood the Toulouse way. And it turned around. When I was there, to be honest, it was very much, what foreign players can you sign? How many can you get? And they're the ones who turned the dial. Bar the clubs who had a really, like Toulon were top when I was there, and that was mainly built around the backies, the Johnny Wilkins, etc. So I think French rugby has revolutionised itself. I'm fascinated though to know what Noel thinks of this current French national team, and their involvement in terms of their playing style, because that for me is what's really interesting on Saturday.
Well, let's take the ball on that one, no?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting one. Obviously, after the World Cup, there was a big clear out of conditioning and coaching staff. So, and ironically, like maybe just to illustrate the volatility of the top 14, both of those coaches have since left. So, Karim Giselle was the forwards coach. He ended up going to Stade Francais as the head coach. Laurent Lebitte was the attack coach. He ended up going to Stade Francais as the director of rugby. Paul Gustard had started there as well. And since then, Paul Gustard has now taken over as the head coach. Karim Giselle has actually gone to Lyon as the head coach. And Laurent Lebitte is currently, and I suppose probably what can be best described as gardening leave. Thibaut Giroud originally signed at Racing, and then didn't ever start at Racing, and has ended up with us, and has done a fantastic job with us in Bordeaux. But it was just an awful lot of change after the World Cup, and I think that was probably in evidence a little bit. Since then, they've obviously, Galtier is there. They've got the best player in the world. I think, there's very few arguments around that in Antoine Dupont. And they have created a system of play, trying to play to Dupont's strengths. I think, their shapes are very, very unusual. They tend to just play with a block of 6 forwards to play around 9 and try and propose opportunities. Their backs tend to swing and look to take advantage of opportunities that present themselves. They've got a very strong set piece, largely based on the likes of Antonio, the likes of Marchand, the likes of Cyril Boy and Kroos. They've got a good lineout, and we'll get on maybe to the nitty gritty of what that might look like. I think that will probably be one of the main axes of the game on Saturday. But they've got some fantastic individual talent as well. We already mentioned Louis and Damien, but even in the layer in behind that, Addis Ogbe, Gaetan, the depth and the level of talent is incredible, really. Leo Barre, Roman Buros with Bordeaux, and so on. So it's fascinating because the feeling in France is that this is it for Galtier. They need to win. They need to win the Six Nations. They need to start winning trophies. This is considered a golden generation. They've won numerous under-20 World Cups. They have a depth of talent coming through. He's got an unprecedented, as I mentioned, level of support from the clubs. To the extent of during the fallow weeks in the Six Nations, the capacity to protect 19 players. There's a training squad of 42 players. So this is probably, the most support that there has ever been given to a French team. The agreement was signed before the World Cup, but they've managed to keep that agreement in place. The feeling after the World Cup was, maybe the presidents are going to revolt and they're going to look for a land grab and take some of that back. But that hasn't happened. So there certainly has been some teething issues, I think, in terms of the new coaching staff and how they gel together. But ultimately, there is pressure, I think, on them and on their coach to deliver.
What's the perception of Ireland among the kind of French rugby public at the moment? Is this, like, for the last few years, the title has essentially been between Ireland and France over the last few seasons? Is this now become like kind of the big game of the Six Nations for France?
Yeah, I certainly think it is a big game. I don't know if it is the big game, but it is certainly. Ireland would have enormous respect for what they've achieved over the last number of years. The players would talk about robots sometimes. I think the thing about Ireland and where the biggest respect would come from is just the consistency. The consistency of Ireland. You can almost be guaranteed with Ireland that, almost with every player, you're going to get an 8 out of 10 performance. The reality with France is at times that swings dramatically from, a 5 out of 10, a 3 out of 10 to a 12 out of 10. And I think that's certainly something, but there would be huge respect, and obviously there's been fantastic rivalry between the clubs, albeit largely in recent years between Leinster and Toulouse and La Rochelle in particular. But I think the players are well aware of the quality of Ireland. They're well aware, and there would be a lot of respect with the French public as well, to be honest about it. And it is around their consistency, huge fascination around the system, and how a country as small as Ireland can, continue over what is now becoming a long period of time to punch above their weight and win trophies, produce players, and there's just a lot of respect, I suppose, really.
Just I think I'd like to pick up on Noel's point there. So I'm doing a piece for pre-match for RTÉ around that shape or lack of shape in attack, and like I don't know, I haven't framed it yet, the word, but like it's like set up ugly to play beautifully. Like it doesn't make sense the way they align themselves. And like maybe, and they would say also the Anglo-Saxon mentality that you have to have, real detail around how you're going to play through the forwards and playmakers out the back and what happens in the next phase and who's going to resource that breakdown, etc. And just like some of the images that are in the first 3 games for France, especially screenshots. I know screenshots are deceptive, but it's just amazing to see. It's like no other team in international rugby. Maybe down tier 2, tier 3, but that's because maybe a lack of a philosophy.
Do you mind me interrupting? Do you mind me asking? Do you mind me asking? Like when you say those shapes are so unusual, what are you seeing?
Well,
like, is it pods of forward scattered around?
It's effectively lots of bodies in the same area without a second layer often. You know what I mean? So there's only really one option. Sorry, that's harsh because you can. Just as Noel said, 6 players together, 6 forwards together, but there's no deception really until they go to the line, and then it's footwork, it's power, it's ability to keep the ball alive, its ability to offload, and they turn their back into contact sometimes, but offload the ball. They go lateral, and then someone straightens. So the Barre try against Italy, where Dupont just has a snipe, and he fixes his defender, and then Barry just comes hard off his shoulder. But I think it's working because Antoine is just on a different level, and he gets sick on podcasts. I get sick of talking about him, but every time you watch a team that he plays in, you just see beautiful rugby, beautiful attacking rugby. But as I said, the Anglo-Saxon mentality is, you need to have structure and a hell of a lot of detail to open up those holes, stress the defense to allow you play on the front foot. And I don't know, it looks to me like RTÉ. So France is statistically now, the challenge with this is France played a Welsh team at home and Wales looked like they had no real plan or no energy, right? So the stats from that game can be deceptive. And then the Italian game, France put them to the sword, but you'd have to say that Italy weren't anywhere near where they normally are. So the stats could be deceptive. They played 2 games where they were on the front foot for the majority of the game. But they're kicking the same amount as they've kicked, but their carries are way up. And Dupont's stats, if you look at the other 5 scrum halves, in the competition who've started and played 60 minutes plus, like where his strengths and where his outputs are completely different, and like rightly so, because why would you have a player of his ability and just tell him to pass kick? You know what I mean? But yeah, it's fascinating to see, and it's fascinating to see how Ireland set up to defend, because they're not obsessed about having wit, but if you look at a lot of their scores, when they need to have wit, they always have someone out there who has created wit, and they're able to kick pass or get the ball there in a very efficient and effective way. So I just think for Ireland, they're an unbelievable threat on Saturday, and because you don't come up against teams who are attacking like them or have the power and pace and confidence they have, it makes and some world class players who can basically just grab this game and take it away from you if they're let. It's a highly challenging game from East to be not just a head coach but as a defense coach to try and plan and try and stop them.
And I think, no, like in line with that, it probably sums up just why I can't remember a game in the last 5-6 years where I've had less of an idea what is actually going to happen at the weekend. It just seems so hard to predict, where Ireland have been pretty good. A couple of halves here or there where they haven't really excelled. But from France, you're looking at two utterly explosive, dominant wins, and then one game where they probably could have won comfortably, but somehow conspired to lose. So you can come up with whatever opinion you want based on France's games, that either they're an incredible team or they might struggle, and it just leaves so much uncertainty and so much excitement, I suppose, for what's coming this weekend.
100%. I think they were unlucky to lose at Twickenham, to be honest. I think anyway. There's lots of other little bits and pieces to do with that game and selection and everything else, and probably some of the coaching decisions that were made during the game. But I definitely agree with Bernard around their attack and the danger that it presents, because they're not pictures that you see all the time. Ireland, obviously, and Ireland's defence is fascinating as well, because Ireland's defence is largely based around pressure at the tackle and pressure at the ruck, and they're trying to bring together, I suppose, as much as anything else, the Leinster system. We've seen some glitches in the matrix, particularly from right to left. I think Calvin, there was one with Robbie Henshaw where I think Calvin was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" When Robbie shot out of the line against Scotland, and obviously there's safeties in place with Leinster, and we saw one of those with Tommy O'Brien on the weekend against Cardiff, where you've got that scramble coming underneath. But Ireland don't have that in place. That's not part of what they're doing. So it'll be interesting to see, having had another couple of weeks together, whether that is, because I think that is something that France in particular, and I think that's the positive for Ireland. They've had a little bit more time maybe to try and iron those out and get a little bit more cohesion in their defence, because they are going to rely on it. I think Ireland are kicking more. They're tending to kick a little bit longer. They're not as much possession based as they were, so they will need to defend well. I think France, over a long period of time, particularly around Dupont, but with Ramos, with Intermac, they kick very well. They kick very long. We've experienced it against Toulouse, against that tree in particular. It's very difficult to win the territory battle against them. So that brings into, obviously, England. Their solution was they went to contestable kicking, but they're built around that. They're built around the contestable kicking. They've been doing it for a long period of time. They did it under Eddie. Bortwick obviously had a lot of success with Leicester Tigers doing the same thing. So I don't know if Ireland, what their approach will be, but I think that's going to be very, very important. I think how they deal with the attack dimension, because the reality is, if you collapse the defence, and I think that's what they're trying to do, Bernard. There is a plan. Galtier he's a bright guy. You know what I mean? It's not that they're just parsing around and trying to do something. They're trying to collapse the defence, and then they've got a lot of pace. So, like, if they can collapse the defence, and against a team that tries to put pressure on the breakdown, and we know that Tyke Byrne, Dan Sheehan, Ronan Kelleher, Bundy, Caelan, Josh van der Fleer. So if you're not accurate, Ireland will win a lot of turnovers. But if you are accurate and you manage to compress in the defence, then you can maybe take advantage of some of the opportunities going to be presented out wide with fantastic players. Ramos, Urim, albeit Urim is one of the guys that can do some damage on the inside as well. So I think there's a fascinating game in store around the kicking game, what that looks like, how they decide to go about that, whether they make a change. Certainly think Ireland are kicking longer and more, and obviously Sam adds to that. But whether they can win that, occupation battle against France, will have a bearing. And Ireland obviously kick for different reasons as well, because they want to generate lineouts. Because obviously that's where they're at their best in that source of possession. So it's probably one of the games that most look forward to in a long time.
Just on that, I totally agree. No, Ireland kick for lineouts, and again, it's only 3 games, but statistically, our lineout isn't performing that well. 88%. France's lineout is actually the best, I think, at 97%, and France's defensive lineout's actually being going really well. So again, that may affect Ireland's strategy. Like, obviously, we have been kicking a bit longer than normal, and as rightly said, Sam has been a part of that. But France under Edwards, I think Edwards' influence hasn't just been. I know when he got the job, he said to Galtier, "I'm not taking the job unless you bring a kicking coach in," because effectively their lack of a plan in kicking and their poor kicking was putting the defence under unbelievable stress. So he's got a guy called Vlock Killier in there, and their kicking policy has been really consistent in long and on. Long and on. So if Ireland, and it's good that we have a long kicking game, but again, you're basically going to get into a battle with a team who've been doing this for 3 years and trying to outkick them, and also you risk that at some stage they look up and say, right, we're going to go. You know what I mean? We're going to go and we're going to counterattack you, which they obviously have people who can beat that first man, and then they're into their jouet. So yeah, for me, I know it's going to be, the players are going to make it a phenomenally interesting game to watch, but how both coaches have kind of set up their teams to negate the strengths or attack the weaknesses of what they see in the opposition is going to be equally fascinating.
No, 100%. And obviously, Bernard, as well, you see, it was called the DuPont law for a reason. So like the reality is France used that to try and protect their tight 5, to try and stop them from being exposed in the middle of the pitch and limit the running that they had to do. The DuPont law changed, and now they've gone to the 7-1. It's the same reason. It's trying to protect their tight 5 and try and ensure that they can be as effective as possible for as long as possible. And the selection will be interesting around the line. I do think that is something that France will have to will have to try and go after as much as possible. And I think Flamand is a very, very underrated player. He's a fantastic rugby player, to be honest about it, and not just in the lineout, around the pitch as well. And he's put on a bit of density. His capacity to carry, his evasion at the line, little tips at the line, and all of that is significantly improved as well. Aldred didn't train yesterday. It'll be interesting to see. I think he has big performances in him, albeit maybe not as consistent as he has been over just in terms of backing it up game on game. But he still has the capacity to have huge performances as well.
What's your feeling on Miafu? Miafu be fit?
I don't know. I don't know. There's lots of positive noises, but certainly the feeling was that he was going to be out for a little bit longer last week. So it's hard to see. Like, pneumonia is, it's not a joke. It's not something that you just bounce back and everything is fine immediately afterwards. So I'm not sure, but that Leon Locke has been really, really good. Yeah. I underestimate him at Tripurlin. Again, it just gives an indication at the level of depth that they have. Like, we played Toulon earlier in the year. Charles Ollivon was absolutely outstanding. He was fantastic. He unfortunately did his ACL and missed the rest of the season. But the depth that they have, some of the young players that are coming through. We've got young number 8, Marco Gazzotti. Bernard mentioned players being signed from Grenoble. He's one of them. Former French under-20 player, but he's in the extended training squad. But
he's class.
He's like a young Caelan Doris. Week in, week out, he's just so physical, so effective, and they just have a massive conveyor belt of players at this moment in time. But I do think that that line-out battle, whether they can put as much pressure as possible on Ireland, try and disrupt that platform, and then obviously it's transition attack for them. that there's the two sides of the coin, and I think that is probably where, you know, the biggest difference between the two teams is just the ability to play in that unstructured, you know, turnovers, counter-attacking, or certainly loose counter-attacking opportunities. Because I agree with you on that as well. I think not just the wingers, but you know, Dupont when he's in the backfield, Ramos when he's in the backfield, Ntamack when he's in the backfield. You know, I think they're all capable of just, you know, beating that front line, the first couple of defenders, and then getting in behind you. When they're in behind you, they're ruthless.
Just Noel, do you think, I'm not doubting the decision of each of these players individually to be in the French team, but do you think it's helped Galtier that there's, you know, this is a backbone of Bordeaux and Stade Toulousain players who, you know, when you watch them play for their clubs, there is a clarity around philosophy around, you know, having a go, and I'm not trying to simplify it, but just, you know, that there's a positive attitude to playing, and then you merge that together in a French team who seem to have a positive attitude to playing, and it just looks much more seamless than maybe it has at times in the past where they were kind of playing by numbers a little bit, and it was leading to success because what Galtier did was he brought discipline to this to this French team and an understanding of game management, I felt. But now that's still there. The discipline is phenomenally good at the moment in terms of penalties given away. But there seems to be a lot of players who understand the opportunity that's in front of them when it's on, and to go and attack that. And against England, and I totally agree with you, you know, selection, game changes that they didn't make. But I felt against England, France still believed that they were just going to score. You know what I mean? That they eventually would score more than England, and only got caught. I think there's another 2 or 3 minutes in that game. France go score again. You know what I mean? That's how superior they were. But yeah, just the whole Bordeaux-Toulouse thing. If that's helping France at the moment.
I think it is. I think the reality is the team is largely based on Toulouse, to be honest with you, and you know it is that. I think of the starting team, the hooker certainly will be Toulouse. The two locks, if they're available, I don't think Mayfield will start. You know, the back row on the bench, you'll have, you know, either Marchand, you'll have Cyril Boy, you'll have Al de Grady. You know, you'll likely have Mayfield, you'll likely have Le Gilange. So, and you know, even on the backs, you talk about the Bordeaux backs, but the reality is there's 4 Toulouse backs. It will be Dupont, it will be Ntamack, it will be Thomas Ramos. And I think it will be Barassi. There was some talk that Gael Ficou was going to come in and play, but I think the feeling is that they're going to continue with Barassi. So, largely speaking, the team is based on Toulouse. You know, certainly Urim, Damien, I think, and Louis will play. I think Maxime will be on the bench, and you know, they have a good connection, I think, with those Toulouse players. They certainly have a freedom of spirit and an ability to take advantage of the opportunities. And that is one thing I think that, you know, Damien and Louis in particular together, you know, you look at the England game, I don't know how many times they, you know, they assist or score with each other when they double up on the other side. So there definitely is a connection there, but largely based around Toulouse, to be honest with you, Bernard.
Yeah.
Bernard, how do you expect Ireland to protect or work with Sam Prendergast defensively? Because that's where the spotlight has been on for the last couple of weeks. And do you expect France to be targeting his channel as much as possible?
Yeah, but every team tests out that seam anyway. You know, it's the quickest way to the gain line. I don't know if Ireland will try and hide him, to be honest. You know, like we see sometimes with putting a 10 in the channel in a real extreme scenarios. I just think to be very aware of the need to double team when people go at him. Sam is very brave. He's thrown himself at people. He's been caught a bit of a speed bump at times. But yeah, I don't think there's any. It's very difficult in international rugby to hide someone because there's consequences of where you put him next. You know, so I think they'll just be very focused on having nice support inside and outside, and making sure that if there is a dent, that it's not catastrophic. You know, it's not a line break. It's a gain line, because I think he gives Ireland so much at the moment in other areas, and he's developing. But yeah, I think it's very hard to hide in Test rugby. You might hide him for the first set piece, But after that, he's going to be defending somewhere where he's not used to defending, and I think that can be actually worse than actually letting him stay there and show improved tackle tech.
What have your thoughts of Prendergast been over the last 12 months, Noel? In Ireland, we're finding it very hard to get the balanced view. Everyone seems to have a vested interest somehow in it. I am always fascinated to hear what someone outside the Irish bubble has to think about it.
Yeah, listen, it's very clear. He's had a fantastic year. I think he's a fantastic player. I think he's a fantastic prospect. I think some of it is probably a little bit over the top. I think the balance is always the key. I've often said the only guarantee with young tens is they're going to make mistakes. The one thing that I really, really like about Sam is when he does make a mistake, he never shies away. He always fronts up. He's there ready, and it never seems to have a negative impact on him. He's had a good Six Nations. It's as simple as that. The reality is, they had a massive error just before, I think it was towards the end of the Welsh game where he missed a touch. And, if Wales score on that, then all of a sudden, do we come down on him like a ton of bricks and say, what is he doing? And it's dreadful. And I just think it needs to be balanced. Even the conversation around the defence stuff at the moment, he's a brave defender. I would definitely agree with Bernard. I wouldn't dream of hiding him. I wouldn't dream of, what do you put him on the blind wing or put him here, put him there, put him everywhere. Like, the reality is Josh will be on his inside, Bundy will be on his outside. Sometimes it's almost better because you know where they're going to attack. And Josh can get on the ball, can slow it down. And there's almost a little bit of comfort in knowing where they're going to go. But it's been impressive for a young player to do what he's done. I don't think we should forget about Jack Crowley. I don't think we should forget about Kieran Frawley. I don't think we should forget about Harry Byrne. I think that's the reality. But for me, I've been very impressed. I don't know Sam, and I think a lot of the feedback that you hear is just around how confident and assertive and some of the leadership aspects as well, which obviously are all things that take place. Take place a little bit behind the scenes, but I think it's brilliant for Irish rugby. I think it's brilliant for Leinster. I still think the brilliant part of it is how good can he get? It's not the finished product. I think anyone that thinks he is probably maybe looking at it in a little bit of a different tilt. And as you say, it can become a little bit toxic at times from looking at it from the outside. I just think we need to understand that this is brilliant. This is a young player. There's going to be ups and downs. When he's good, absolutely, it's good. When it's bad, I think there needs to be a little bit of an equilibrium. A balance is probably the best phrase, because similar to the nines in France, we probably have a similar attitude towards tens in Ireland. The reality is Sam is very lucky. James Lowe takes an inordinate amount of pressure off him. Jamison Gibson Park takes an enormous amount of pressure off him. I think, this weekend is going to be a massive test for him. And because I think Lowe will have his hands full. I think Jamison will have plenty of pressure in his face as well. So it's just understanding that, there will be good, there will be bad, and it'll be all part of his development. Because I think it was even, listening to Johnny and Rog and these guys talking about, when I was 22, where they were in their respective careers in comparison with Sam. So it's just about having some balance. But the reality is, if Johnny was 27 or 28, Sam wouldn't have the same level of exposure right now. So I think, that would be my view on it anyway.
Just Neil, can I have a final word on this? So basically, the idea of hiding him, the effect that could have on. So it's much worse to miss a tackle on the edge or a 13 or in the backfield than it is to miss one at 10. And just thinking there about this, when the new scrum half rules came in around where the scrum half can defend, ironically, the first game that was in for was a Munster match. And I was chatting to Mike Prendergast before the game. I said, how do you think this is going to play out? Surely it means off a scrum, the 8 can just get to the 10 like so easily, you know what I mean, and get over the gain line. And I think that is possible, but we all watch a lot of rugby. You're not seeing teams just do that all the time because, as Prendy said, what do you do next? You know what I mean? What do you do next? Like you move the point of contact 7 or 8 meters from where the scrum was. You might have got over the gain line, but like have you compressed the defense enough to be able to hurt them on the next phase? And I think that's part of it too. So yeah, you may get an easier gain line there if you can get him on his own at the moment. But what do you do next? You know what I mean? Are you willing to give up the opportunities elsewhere to really get you on the front foot and to get the opposition in a shape defensively that you want? And that'll be very much in Galtier's mind as well. They certainly will go after that space, but I don't think they'll be slaves to it. You know?
Final point on the match itself this weekend, and I would say a well-timed announcement from the RFU last week from an emotional energy and motivational point of view would be the retirements of Cian Healy, Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray from Test Rugby, all 371 appearances between them. That obviously, Bernard, is an enormous motivation coming into this week for the rest of the squad to do those fellas right in their last home game. But also just as well, it's worth talking about the legacy that the three of them are leaving in Irish rugby.
Yeah, and they'll be doing everything in their power for the legacy to be even stronger in terms of silverware. I think the game is about, and particularly in France, the game is a lot of it's about emotion and getting that emotion right. And Galtier will be looking for reasons to get them at the right emotional pitch. And Easterby and Farrell in particular, because we've obviously seen more of him, has been a master of it. And this definitely will help Ireland, be able to focus the mind and be in the right place. Because these lads have left an unbelievable legacy. And to be fair, it's a strength and a weakness of the Irish system that they're still doing it, right? But I think overall it's a strength because they have kept adding value. Like we would have been absolutely screwed without Cian Healy for the last 3 or 4 years, even though he's not a starter anymore. His ability to be on the bench and close out games for us has been massive. Conor and Peter started 2 games already in the Six Nations and may start a third. So I do think it should be an unbelievable game for them to play their last ever game in the Aviva. The result is far from a foregone conclusion, but they will all have an active role to play in deciding the result, I think.
And no.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Bernard. I think it's probably a real positive for the player management system that is in Ireland, that they have been able to continue to play at the level that they've played at, and that's Bernard mentioned Peter starting 2 games. He didn't just start 2 games; he performed in 2 games, and I think that's the real remarkable thing for me is that they have continued to be fit, to be available, and to perform at the very, very highest level. And it's amazing, really. In sport, you rarely get the opportunity to go out on your terms, and I think it's a fitting way for them to finish. I assume all 3 will be involved in the match day 23, and just a remarkable opportunity to play a game of that level with something real and tangible on the line. And I do think the emotional piece is interesting. I think if anything, I think this Irish group have tried to be as balanced as possible and maybe celebrate things as much as anything else. And I think that's been a real strength of this regime. Celebrating the 50th, celebrating the 100th, celebrating records, celebrating the individual within the team, celebrating their own individuality and not trying to conform too much. And I think that will probably feed into it because it can go the other way as well. It can become very, very emotional and become a drain on the week. And I think that's something that this Irish management group and this coaching group have done fantastically well over the course of the last number of years, finding the right balance in all of that, and generally speaking, getting the best. And we mentioned France already. France are very aware of that. They know that they're going to have to play very, very well to beat Ireland. So they know that this won't be a game where a 6 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10, or if a few of them aren't quite on the boil, that they'll just be able to get the job done. So I think that adds something to it as well.
One word verdict: Ireland or France this weekend? Bernard, I'll leave you go first.
Ireland 25, France 24.
No,
that's incredibly specific, Bart. You clearly have that one planned all day.
I've doubled down. I said that against the head on Monday, so I can't flip it now.
I find it very difficult to call, and obviously I've got an investment on the French side as well. So I'm a little bit worried from an Irish perspective, if I'm honest. I really do think this is going to be incredibly tight, and I think Ireland will have to be at their maximum to beat them.
Yeah, I'm just about leaning Ireland, but I'd say come back to me again in 24 hours and I'll have changed my mind. Final bit before we go. I do want to mention Munster's appointment of Clayton McMillan that came in after we recorded our podcast last week. Obviously, big appointment, and as we're recording this at the moment, Bernard, confirming the inevitable, Munster have announced JJ Hanrahan's return, which we expected since last week as well. I suppose just your reaction to McMillan coming in. It was a bit of a left field choice initially, but has been warmly received, I would say, over the course of the last few days.
Yeah, just to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a big statement, to be fair. I think he's a coach with a high level of experience, a head coach doing great things in Super Rugby. Obviously, he's a forward coach, and with Graham and Andy leaving, there was a vacuum there. I think the safe option was to give it to Mike Prendergast. I thought Prendy was an outstanding candidate. To be fair, because he's been away, he's built up experience, he's proven himself in Ireland, in Munster, in terms of how they've changed, how they want to play. But I can see the reasoning behind it, and I think the most important thing is if you go for an outsider, get someone who backs up. And I spoke to some coaches who worked with him closely, and they say he's an outstanding person, real strong knowledge of the game. And will have an influence on Munster, and will try and tap into the old Munster ethos and identity. You know, he's is a big part of who he is, ex-policeman, disciplinarian, but not in an old school way. He brings people with him. So I think it's a great piece of business. JJ is a good piece of business. Dan Kelly, Lee Barron, Michael Mill, etc. So I think there's positive signs off the field. I feel sorry for Brendy, but it's pro sport, and they've obviously gone. They wanted to bring someone from outside, and Prendy being promoted senior coach, I think would, and he'd be stupid not to tap into Leamy and Prendy, etc. So, and he's not a stupid guy; he's a very smart guy. So, yeah, it's a good statement from Munster.
Are you excited, mate? Noel, are you excited about, as Bernard listed out there, the coaching ticket they have, the recruitment they're doing for next season? Do you see Munster being upwardly mobile over the next couple of seasons?
Yeah, 100%. I think it was left field. I hadn't seen anything about him, and I don't know him personally, but all the feedback from the players that have worked with him seems to be incredibly positive. I think they've got good coaches already in place. I've obviously worked with Dennis in the past. We've seen what Mike has done. I think Mossy Lawler is a very understated signing as well, who gets Munster and who adds a lot of value to them as well. So. I think by and large there's lots of reasons. It will be a big time of change. You can't lose two personalities like Conor Murray and Peter O'Mahony from the building and not feel a little bit of a loss. But it's about that next generation of players stepping up and stepping into those leadership roles. And I think they have them there. I think there's a good group of players, as you mentioned, coming in. So, and we forget as well, like it's 2 seasons ago they won the URC. It's not like as if it's 15 years ago. So the reality is the Josh Wycherleys, the Craig Casey's, the Thomas Ahern, Jack Crowley's. These guys have experienced winning a trophy. So you would hope to see them I suppose take that next step and continue to improve, because I think they can. I think all the ingredients are there.
Yeah, it really is the start of a new era. Like when you factor in those players moving on like Murray and O'Mahony. Huge amount of rugby coming up on RTÉ over the next few days. Ireland against France, obviously, in the Guinness Six Nations, Saturday from 1:15 p.m. on RT2 and RT Player, and live commentary on RT Radio 1. There's also England against Italy on Sunday afternoon on RT2 as well. And the Ireland-France under-20s match, Friday evening, 7:35 p.m. on RT2 and RT Player. Bernard, thanks a million as usual. And Noel, it's been brilliant having you on the podcast. Very best of luck for the rest of the season. Particularly, obviously, you've got Ulster coming up in the Champions Cup, so we will be keeping a closer eye on Bordeaux over the next few weeks as well. And the best of luck with the rest of the top 14 season also.
Thanks very much. Much appreciated.